So excited for this panel, and when you guys introduce yourselves right now, tell me your name, what company you're from, although I know some of you guys are wearing your shirts, which is awesome, and the funniest thing a user has said to your chatbot, or vice versa. We can start from either side, whoever wants to start. We'll just go in a row.
So my name is Suyash Joshi. I work at Oracle as an evangelist, and I have a big passion for UX design. I also run a design meetup in San Francisco called San Francisco Interaction Design Meetup. The funniest thing somebody has asked is, because I work at Oracle, can your bot predict the future?
That's a good one.
Hi, my name is Obaid. I'm the founder and CEO of BotMock. We are a prototyping and design tool for conversational apps. So for Alexa, Google Assistant, Slack, any platform really. So the funniest thing, so we have a support chatbot with Intercom, and we see a lot of weird questions on it. We had a male and female avatar on our support channel, and female do get asked out a lot.
Hi everyone, I'm Andrew. I'm a conversational designer from Google Assistant team. Right now I'm focusing on scaling Assistant onto different surfaces. So with our new smart display, cars and stuff, I'm trying to find good use case for Google Assistant. Prior to that, I actually work at Amazon. So I actually have been working in the voice assistant realm for a while. The funniest thing I think I've ever what I can recollect is actually there are people actually say hand up to the assistant to tell her to shut up. And I was like really surprised about it. It's like, wow, people treat it as a phone call.
Hi guys, I'm Dustin Dye. I am CEO and founder of BotCopy. We started about 2 years ago as creative writers, tackling the space and giving some of the industry's engineers some good copy to coincide with their talented technology. The funniest thing that well, at least I've seen, is from one of our bot builds called Doc, and it was Doc, bot, sucks, cock, Alex Eagers, sucks, period. Alex Eagers is my partner, he's back there, and it was pretty funny to me because he was his friend testing, and we didn't know.
So hello everybody, I'm Vittorio. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Botsociety. Botsociety is a design tool for chatbots and voice assistants. You can design for any platform, also your own application. One of the most funny things is that sometimes people ask like philosophical questions to bots. So they send questions like, who am I? With a picture. And we're like, dude, we have no idea. Like, it is like a customer support chatbot. Yeah.
Love it. Awesome, guys. So this is, of course, a loaded question, but I figure we should at least throw this out there so we can start the conversation on this, especially for some of you guys in the crowd who are new to chatbots and came here to find out a little bit more about the design process. So from a 30,000-foot view, what does designing a chatbot experience actually look like for you guys? And I'm really interested to hear all of your answers because we have like varied experience up here. We've got, from the copywriting angle as well as actually visually putting together what that process could look like. So if you guys each kind of want to touch on what that process looks like from a very broad level, because I know this discussion could go on for like days, but just a really general process understanding of what that looks like for you from the beginning to end. And whoever wants to start.
So for me, I think designing a chatbot is designing, and for me, I actually come from a classical trained interaction design background. Designing a chatbot is actually understanding user needs to actually figure out what are the use cases, what are the kind of like conversational behavior that people actually have in their life, and what exactly they want to do with it. And a lot of parts, like what I face is today is like a lot of people say, oh, we have this Google Assistant, we have this capability, let's just make a chatbot. But for me, the first view is actually looking into, hey, is voice actually have a place in all these use cases? How voice, how bot, what is it actually really good at? So we can actually drill down into, is this the right use case? Is this the right user experience to build? Instead of going into looking into, hey, like we have this capability, let's build something.
Yeah, so just building on that, I think what we have seen that works very well for designers in our platform is being able to test out their ideas quickly. You know, once you are thinking about building an assistant app or either voice or chatbot, like for Facebook Messenger or any platform like that, you look at all the use cases that users can solve, all the problems that you can solve for them, and then quickly create iterative process. You know, build 5, 6, 7 different prototypes that you can test out quickly without having to write a lot of code or do a lot of manual work to bring it together. Not jumping into the AI right away, not jumping into any intents and entities development and all that stuff. Just being able to quickly create these experiences, test them out, decide, you know, throw some of the ideas out, build on more and more of these prototypes. That's what we believe that's the best way of approaching design.
Yeah, coming from enterprise company, and I've talked to quite a few designers in our company who are really smart and do this every day. What I've heard is that really need to think about users' need, like he said, and also business needs, because you know, at the end of the day, you're building this to solve, you know, a problem, but also offer value. So a lot of times, engineers or technical people, they get, you know, excited by the technology and they just want to build it. Marketing will get excited because it's another channel and just want to put it out there. But people forget, like, okay, can we support this? What is, when the user is going to use it, is how many times is it going to fail? What's the failure rate? Because they're only going to use it a few times. And the first few times is the key. If the bot cannot understand the request, cannot give a proper response, if the business integration or the business, just the value is lacking, then there is not going to be many users. So really, essentially, you have to think holistically before jumping with the technology.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the first 3 to 4 weeks of any project that we start with is really understanding in our, what we call a discovery process. What are we going to start with? It's easy for clients to come to us and want everything. Like, can it do this, this, this? And in the beginning, we wanted to say yes. But we found it way better as far as design, and especially for some of the creative copy that we script, to identify some of the KPIs, the key performance indicators that we can start with each client. So if a client comes and wants the bot to do 10 different things, we might say, what are the most important 2? You know, and then we look at that and say, okay, once we accomplish these 2, let's move on to the other 8, and move with the demand that's coming in, because in the beginning we like to take as many live conversations as possible. And I'll assign some of our writers just to pick up and answer the phone calls that are coming in from these businesses, just so we start to understand and can identify what's the most natural conversation that can exist to accomplish these tasks that the bot is being hired to do. And that's the most important part of the whole process for us. And building that foundation, because it allows us to expand and explore and continue to train this AI, or whether we're in the back like Wizard of Oz, actually like typing and messaging to learn, but to build a better, more successful use case for, you know, a product that can grow. And that's where we get excited.
Awesome. So a part of that, did you want to say anything? Or are you good? Okay, cool. So a part of, I think, just a chatbot overall is its personality, and I know people have differing views on this, so I'm curious to hear, for those of you guys who do add a personality when you're building a chatbot where it's not entirely practical, like some of the people we've had on the panel, on our other panels have mentioned, when you're designing that, where does the creation of the bot personality happen in your overall design process, and how do you actually put that together? What questions do you ask, you know, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a very good question, I think. So just building off also what we were saying before, like the first step is in like being sure that the use case makes sense, that follows what the people are expecting, and that's what has been discussed. And then that's kind of independent from the personality, right? But then once that's defined, then the personality helps you in clarifying what the use case is together with the brand, because it sets kind of the context. So it's a good point to start defining the personality right away after your use case. That's in our experience, because each time you talk with somebody, you will experience a personality, and there's no way around it. It's like color in like a graphical interface. You cannot say, oh, we will make this button no color. It will be white or black, right? It's the same with personality. And so the way that you approach people is like personality gives you context. So it helps build expectations about what a bot can do. And so depending on the use case, you can use the personality to clarify that. So if your bot like has a very strong personality and it's very outspoken, you will expect him to, to be more verbose when you're asking stuff, for example, and that's part of the expectation that you create. I don't know what you think, but
I agree. Personality is huge, and whether you're trying to create a funny, like add some humor to the bot, or be straightforward, or give feedback for someone who might be skeptical on purchasing whatever you're selling. I often use the analogy, if you go into a room, into a sales meeting, and you're selling the same product, but let's say you have 10 different sales meetings in a day. Now, the approach to that sale is probably going to be different in the first 10 seconds of you identifying who you're selling to. And that's based on their personality. And there's like 14 different personality traits. We typically look and hone in on 4. But start to identify who you were speaking with, what they're really interested in, and we can, whether you're using some NLP or you actually set up buttons to understand like, oh, this is, they hit the button with the exclamation mark, or something that might suggest that they're a little more edgy, then we can have a different conversation that's more meaningful and geared towards them. So that's kind of where we look at building personalities.
Yeah, kind of echoing on that, actually, in human brain, within 300 seconds, you talk to someone, you identify a personality. You want it or not, someone will assign a personality trait to the person. So you don't want your bot actually, when interacting with someone, without a point of view, because you give user the choice of defining what your brand, your product is. So personality needs to be there, and it's great to think early about it. And it doesn't mean you need to add up a lot of delights, like jokes or funny things you tell people, but you can define your bot as straightforward. But that standpoint needs to be there, and that personality will be perceived immediately, and you don't want people to define it for you.
And you can also start looking at other mediums that you are interacting with your customers with. If you have a mobile app, if you have a website, if you have personas for other customers in marketing, you can actually take some cues from that and play around with it. Just to build on Dustin's point, in text-based for Facebook, for example, we've seen people use quick replies to sort of get this gauge. Also, the way people ask you for random questions within your conversation. If you analyze that data, you will start getting an idea for what these kind of customer groups are. Are they edgy or not? Are they asking for things out of random? But you have to be it's a personality can be developed as well over time once you have more data about it. But you can sort of build a persona, go with a very good gut feeling of what you want your brand representation to be. In enterprise bots, for example, telling jokes is a very iffy thing. People want to get things done. They don't sidetrack on that conversation. Consumer-based bots, you can imagine people go on sideways a lot, so be recovering from that.
Yeah, we had this discussion very intently with a lot of designers, and really what I've realized is that maybe personality is not feasible today, but in the future, because today we are limited by the constraints we have of technology. But you have to think of a real world scenario. So let's say I'm an executive and I hired an executive assistant. Now, day one, we're going to be very professional to each other, right? And she's going to slowly start to understand my personality. I'm going to start understanding her personality. And slowly we'll evolve, and I'll talk to her casually, I'll talk to her informally. She'll still understand what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to do, right? So I feel a bot should be able to develop the personality as time goes by. It doesn't have to start day one, but as you start to interact with it more, and I don't know how this will be possible with AI and machine learning and all of those things, and of course, design thinking. So that's how I see a personality of a digital agent evolving in the future. It may not be, start from something very flashy, but it could, slowly, become funny sometimes depending on the user.
Awesome. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you guys face when designing a chatbot? And you guys can talk about it from different angles. For example, when you're actually just going in and doing it yourself internally, or when you're working with a client, which I know all of you guys have. What are the roadblocks that you often face when you are trying to design the bot and, do that as efficiently and quickly as possible?
I think the hardest thing in the beginning is really setting expectations of what can be done and what should be done now when you first get a client, and understand, or when you're working and building a chatbot, and understand how to grow, from there. Like I was saying earlier, it's easy to try to do way too much, and then you have a whole bunch of, conversations coming in, and you don't really know where to grow your product. There were other panels before speaking on, conversations give you the most direct feedback from your user group that you'll ever see. Well, I've ever seen. More than a click of a button, more than a heat map on a website, which kind of got me into the space. It fascinated me. And being able to take that direct feedback and build your product, your service, or your tech in that light. And the hardest thing about that is knowing where to start and how to work with it and continue to build it. We often use this map. If you play video games or anything like that, you might be familiar with the checkpoints, where you get to one stage of the video game and you start over from there. Well, we've been looking at the same type of thing when we're designing these conversations. Each conversation, once it goes from one point to another, is a checkpoint. So if we find out that a user wants to sell, wants to buy something, but then asks a random question, we might say that those are two different checkpoints, and we'll look at this in kind of a graph where the checkpoints will go on like a y-axis, and then inside each checkpoint we'll have an x-axis where we have understanding points. And we start to pick up more information on the users based on, okay, they asked to buy this product, then they asked, specifics within that product, where we create kind of a conversational DNA, and can move forward with that. So creating that DNA helps us with that challenge of like where to go and what people are doing, because it gives us throughout the history of the chat, what they've been asking, where they want to go. And if we look at that and look at all of the conversations within that product, then we can move it forward. But that's kind of our biggest challenge.
Yeah, so I agree with that. One of the biggest challenges is deciding where to start. So I'll try to make like a very down-to-earth example. Instead of talking theory, I think it's maybe more useful. So one of our customers is an airline company, right? And you can interact with an airline in a lot of different ways. And you can think about a bot that does everything, right? Like booking, change the booking, buy the flight, in-flight entertainment, etc. But that would be wrong. Like you don't want to start with everything, like you were saying. Like it's better to start. So what is the interaction where you really want to talk with somebody, in your opinion? So turns out it's luggage. When you lose your luggage, you really want to talk with somebody, right? It's the moment where you're really, I want you to talk with me now, right? So they started just with luggage, like when you lose your luggage or when you're not sure about that. And they built up from that, and it was amazing. Like the users were really confident about it and they learned a lot. So after like 6 months, now they're one by one, they're tackling all the other problems. But that was really the hardest choice, like taking a look at all the interactions and deciding this is where, you know, the users really want to talk with somebody. That's the best place to start off and learn from.
Awesome. Did you want to say something? Okay, cool. Cool. And before we jump to your questions, guys, the last question I have for you is about actually onboarding users to a conversational experience. So obviously that's a really important piece of it in order for, like you said, if someone loses their luggage, of course they're going to be really confident in wanting to talk as much and, you know, as quickly as they can in order to get their luggage back. But for other less urgent circumstances, when you first get people inside of a chatbot conversational experience, how are you guys onboarding users, or what are some unique ways that you guys have done that in the chatbots that you've built?
For us in the beginning, it's really all about placement. You know, where the trigger exists, whether it's on like a Facebook ad, which works, or you put it on your website, or you make your splash image direct people there. We've even, for the luggage example, you know, sometimes in that circumstance, people will look at a contact page, and even having it within the contact page, like that's the only place where the bot exists for that one experience. But it solves the problem, and the right placement is key. And it's easy to miss. It's easy to just hope that it works and put a bot like in certain places, and then it doesn't get clicked as much. You have a login problem with Facebook, and half your users don't have Facebook. So it's all about like really thinking about where you can place it. We've seen a lot of success with certain experiences with QR codes recently. So having the bot be triggered off a QR code by just having the link to that. And yeah.
I think on the design process, I always think about regarding discovery and like onboarding or like new feature release is really about relevance, like kind of like echoing to the placement part, is really understanding why user will care about certain information in certain times. And I think that's the key to conversation, actually. When you have a good conversation with someone, actually is about, oh, I give you the right information at the right time. And I think a lot of discover feature is related to that, like, you know, when you have a new feature, let's say in your weather app about, you know, precipitation, then, you know, when people ask about weather, you can append this information, hey, you know, I can also check about weather precipitation now. But if you are asking for map information and direction and then say, you know, I can also check about precipitation, there's a relevance issue and the quality issue of the information you are giving user. And another part I always also look into is these kind of educational part, there's always a learning curve. So you want to make sure people actually get it, but you know, you don't want to bombard them with too much information eventually. So really understand whether user learn about it, whether they have been using some of the discovery or, you know, new features you have been, you know, presented to them, and then taper it out, really phase it out. I think that's really the key to really good discovery and like onboarding experience.
I would say that onboarding like is really key. It's pretty much everything I would say if you're starting out with a bot, because it's where a lot of users will be the first timers talking to a chatbot, and they'll set the image in their mind of how your bot responds. So it is really what it is about. It's setting the expectations and meeting the expectations. So, you know, starts with just disclosing, okay, with the name or an icon that this is a chatbot and this is what it can do. And then controlling, not in a way leading the conversation so that the user, at least the user's success, you know, providing value, fulfilling the need. If not, then being very clear upfront about it.
Yeah, so just to add to most of these points, it's onboarding with context, right? So if they're starting off from the messenger search, you know, you have a generic onboarding, you want to tell them what that aha moment is, but the one thing your bot can do. Your bot might be able to tell weather and as well as other things, but is that the expectation that you set on the get-go it matters. And then there is context-aware onboarding. So, you know, they scanned a code when their luggage was lost. So you know that they are actually contacting you for customer support, setting their expectation, and then getting them to that point as fast as you can so that they can actually have a relationship with you. If you sort of tell them, this is our tutorial on that, so they're not interested in that. They have a very physical pain right now that they want to get out of. The other thing that we find is that a lot of designers are now using onboarding at different parts for feature releases too. So Google actually does that very well in Google Assistant, is that I usually ask for currency conversion or something like that, or even a language thing. We have an 18-month-old, so we try different voices on Google Assistant. And sometimes it doesn't know certain things when we are asking them, and so it fails at an answer. And the next time I ask the same question in that domain, it actually tells me, oh, by the way, I can also do these things now. And it's sort of like it's educating me on what it can do. And that's onboarding for me. Right? That's still teaching me how to talk to this thing. And but be aware of the context and get to the point very quickly. And I think that's the key for all bots right now.
Two really quick things as far as onboarding that I forgot to mention. One, be really aware of attention span. I don't think anybody in this room likes it when some stranger comes up to them and asks them a ton of questions. It's just annoying, So none of us naturally like that when a stranger comes up and just starts like rambling on. So one, keep that in the back of your mind for the onboarding experience, and think about your user demographic, how long they like to actually engage. And look at those. There are plenty of time parameters that you can look up. And then another important feature is be sure to add value before you try to abstract. So don't just jump into a conversation asking a ton of questions. Provide a bit of value to them, and then start to understand it and unload. Cool.
Awesome points, guys. Anything else you guys want to add before we start taking the questions? Okay, cool. Big round of applause for them. Thank you so much. All right, Andy.
I have a quick question for Dustin. I heard that your company Botcopy created the conference bot and the game to win free Amazon Echoes. Do you have any clues for us?
I kept my creative team up till about 2 a.m. last night helping design this experience. So I don't know really what to expect from this, but the awards have been given out. 5 of them have been won. They are going to be claimed at 5. A clue I can give you is I'm looking at 3 of the clues right now. They're in the room. If the people who won don't show up, the echo is yours. Cool.
I have one more question for Dustin. So, what's the deal? Are you single?
Yeah, no comment there. Any other questions? Yes.
Cool.
So 2 questions. The first one is about the bot persona. What we think works best, in our opinion, is more like professional, keep it lighthearted. That was the first question. The second question is, should we adjust the bot persona based on the user that we're talking to? So here, I think we go towards the opinions. I'm very opinionated, but that's my opinion. So about the second question, I don't like when bots change personality based on the people, just because people talk with each other and they will share their experience with the bot, and they would expect the bot to be the same with everybody else. So they will be very confused if they find out that actually the bot is talking somehow differently. And the same way that you will be confused if you talk with me afterwards and you say, oh, that's different personality than the guy I talked to last week, which may be possible, but confusing. About the personality, so the first question, what works best? I think it really depends on your specific use case. So I've seen chatbots which are very rude and grumpy working really well, just because it was interesting, right? Just because it was funny in that sense. And for B2B, I think be professional, of course, but also be personal. Because that's what the value added of a chatbot is. So if you don't give it a name or you don't give it like a profile picture of some sort, which does not mean it should come up as a human, but as a bot with a personality. So you lose one of the cool things about having, even on a B2B environment, professional environment, a bot, because you don't feel like you're having a conversation if you're not visualizing the person you're talking to. So in my opinion, always give it a name and some sort of demographic and ideas that you have about this person, like the background or stuff like that, even though you know they will never show up, have an idea like the age of the bot, like more or less where he studied, what's the, you know, the things that he likes and stuff like that.
I'm just going to chime on that. The first question for personas for B2B, the question for, you know, should it be a bot or a human entity? I've talked to a lot of designers, and the overwhelming conclusion usually is that be upfront that you're a bot. Set their expectation upfront, right? Because if they think you're talking to a human, they will get more frustrated when you can get basic things or anything advanced not right. So if they ask you something, you always have an option to say, hey, I'm a bot. I can understand the complicated sentence you just said to me. Can you rephrase it, or can I hand you over to a human bot, a human chat agent? And that works out very well. So that's one thing, especially in B2B cases, but it's also true for B2C. The other side of it is, you know, in terms of changing personas, you can not change the entire persona of the personality of the bot, but the way you structure some of the data to them may be a little different. The way you might, you know, insert jokes might be different. So you can have those things a little more tailored towards a particular experience. So, you know, how you would joke with your best friend is different than how you joke with another person you just met in the train, right? So you're still a funny person. It's just your level of jokes goes a little different. So you can do that. You can have that kind of relationship. It's also how often have they talked to you and all the history behind the conversation. So you can use that.
And in terms of the second question that you asked about, like, you know, should I switch the personality depending on a factor of the user's background? Something I've seen that somewhat solves that, if you did want to have different personalities, is if you go check out a bot called Jolt.ai. It's Jolt.ai. I did not build this, but I'm really good friends with the founder and the team who's working on it. This is pretty much a personal activity, like goal accountability bot that is an enterprise solution for gyms. And so what it does, it unlocks, you know, certain things depending on how often you talk to it, and, you know, how long you have a relationship with it. And then at a certain point, one of those checkpoints is that you can change the voice of the bot. And so they have, like, apparently one of their most requested ones was a pirate mode. So they've got, like, you know, it says pirate jokes and things like that. They've got, you know, like a sassy one, sarcastic. So that's an idea for you if, you know, like the others mentioned, it's not always the best solution to have like a different voice for each user that you have, but you can give your users the option to maybe talk to a different personality in your bot. Of course, depending on use case and company. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I'll just quickly say, you know, yes to all of those questions, and even yes, it's possible with some customization. It may not come out of the box, but you can add some custom logic. And real answer to what works, you know, we have a lot of opinions, but real answer is in analytics or data. So that's where, you know, you look at your analytics and see how, or do other kind of tests, A/B test, or even before that, test with prototyping.
Hey, Ryan? Got some questions?
Look at all these. Well, I need a microphone. Sorry, I was talking about my bot. Okay, here we go. Now, we have a lot of questions, so let's try to do maybe lightning round. Does that work? Right? So that we get a bunch of answers in here, like try to make them tweetable or something? All right, here you go.
Okay, in our case, we're using user testing and supported with some analytics around unsupported intents. Besides these two tools, what other analytics or KPIs you are looking to decide that one response or this flow or this interaction has better user experience results?
Best KPI is for usability. Ready, go.
We like using, and I think they're still here, but Dashbot, as far as the analytics, Chatbase is there as well. And then also just going through them yourself and looking at the log is where we usually start.
Yeah. So one point I want to add it up is like when you're looking at a log, oftentimes you only look and say, hey, this error message actually have 99% restriction. This amount of people hit this. But actually, it's really important to look at what's previous and what's after. Oftentimes, conversation is not just about that one turn. Oftentimes, it's a contextual flow that it goes down into. So my findings a lot of oftentimes say, oh, people are saying this and getting this message. We should build a literal response to what they say. Like, actually, one example I like to use like Ghostbuster. Like when I was working on Alexa, there's a lot of people saying Ghostbusters, and we're like, oh, should we get a funny answers there to just like respond to the Ghostbusters? And then we found out actually the previous turn is we are asking, who do you want to call? Ghostbusters, of course. So we actually go do some editorial content over there, but actually that gives us a lot of context on why that fiction is coming, and that is really important.
I have the mic. So what are the qualities and qualifications that we should look for while hiring a conversational designer?
So what are the qualities of a good conversational designer? Is that a question?
Qualifications that or qualities that we should look for while hiring a designer?
Yeah, that's a good question. So first of all, if they have Botsociety in their portfolio, in terms of tools they can use, very good sign. Another very good sign is usually if they have like a mixed background between UX and like journalism or something with storytelling, which is in a written form. So you can basically become a conversational designer either from like graphical designer going towards literature, basically, or the other way around. So from like philosophy or literature background towards UX. So you want to look for somebody who's in that trajectory or has been working on that kind of intersection. I don't know if there's other opinions about this, but that's my experience.
Hi, so we're talking about personalities working, and someone asked about KPIs, and the things that I think about are, can I get someone to engage in the first place, and can I keep them engaged till they finish something? A problem that we run into is how do you experiment with that and iterate on it in the context of a big company with a brand that they're very particular about? How do you experiment with what works with something that might have kind of a tone while in the context of a large company? How do you do that?
I think a great example of that is you look at Geico. Geico, definitely a professional insurance company, and then they had an amazing, campaign with the lizard. Everybody's familiar with the lizard. It's got its own personality. It's fun. It's cute, and we engage with it. We like it. So there's a way to stay branded with that personality, and let it represent the company well. But you should also test everything. What that personality is, how it, molds into what it should be. We sometimes even start pretty bland. And then based on the types of users and who we're getting and what they're saying to us, we can slowly morph the conversation or personality towards, something that they like.
Hi. So when you're having, a lot of time I think the conversations that are had, especially for consumers, are relatively short and straightforward answers. If you're doing something for like an enterprise solution and the response is complicated, like you want to have a question, but then you want to have the answer comprehensive enough to meet the needs of the question, but you don't want to have this huge thing of text. How do you guys think about approaching that? Do you break it out? Do you try to do like conversation paths? What's sort of the best way to make sure that for complicated topics and explanations, you provide that in a usable way?
So in voice, I think you are talking about in the context of like chat, but I think there may be some similarity. There's like one kind of strategy I always use is actually breaking into chunks and having pausing. Oftentimes is, when you, we generally have a fundamental rule is like when it's over 10 seconds, it's starting to get really overbearing. But we actually build intentional pausing to just still flow through the information and go through. And oftentimes we put in conversational market, it's like, are you ready? Or something like, okay, I'm gonna start the next piece of information, telling user upfront, say, hey, next waves of things are coming, so they can have a mental break. And in general, I think in chatbot probably not that related, but in voice, we sometimes do have navigational kind of like intents built in. So if they actually miss something, they want to go back and say, hey, can you tell me that again? We will actually piecing information together again and provide to user. And I think in chatbots, you can look into the same principle as like breaking into small chunks, having some buffering kind of like wordings, and trying to make the information more digestible on the formatting to make sure user don't get overwhelmed with a chunk of like text block. Yeah.
Thanks.
I'll just quickly add, we have something at Oracle called Instant Apps. Basically, a lot of enterprise data needs to be pulled from different systems and different things need to be shown. And we also have a lot of these widgets, these controls that can, like for example, a carousel can show a lot of data that you don't have to put a lot of text or an embedded instant app. Think of it like embedded like an app within the bot interface. So you don't have to leave the context, and within that users can solve their problem. And this really starts with designing the intents and what the entities the intent can handle, or the slots that when your user is saying something, how does it respond to that? It starts with designing those use cases.
You'd mentioned about the airline example where the most preferred case was people talking about the baggage, right? How did you go about ascertaining what kinds of things people want to talk about versus things which we should try and avoid? Any guidance there?
Yeah, so I think you have some proxy metrics there. There's no like formula, but one very good proxy metric is what are the conversations already happening between, for example, in this case was like the company and their customers, right, and the consumers. Even if we don't think about automation, generally speaking, where is that people are just trying to have conversations naturally. And it may be, in the sales process, it may be in the customer support process, it may be in the upselling. But you usually see higher propension of people of starting conversations. So there will be conversation happening already. And maybe it's not exactly this same use case, but it's something that will guide you towards that. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that you can do a lot of testing. So with design tools, you can, just like you test like a mobile app and you show it to somebody even though it's not built and it's just a mock-up, and you ask them some questions in terms of like, what do you think this is doing, and how helpful would this be, and when was the last time you wanted to do something like that. And even if you run just like 5 of those tests and you run an interview for like 15 minutes each, it's like 3 hours, and it's very, very informative in terms of like where you should go, and it can save you months in like discovering that when it's too late.
Yeah, just to add to that, if you're an airline or anything like that, which is already customer service focused, your customer service sort of call logs is gold mine to figure that part out. Pretty much all of our customers who are building customer service bots, that's the overwhelming of them. That's how they're finding their use cases. They're looking back at the data and saying, what can we build a bot for, just to answer one thing first and then expand more and more on it. And they might have taken something that's asked more frequently, or just it's easy for them to answer, whatever the criteria might be, but you can pick any one of those problems and you can look at that.
I figure if I ask for questions, nobody's going to do it, so I just put my hands out,
the question now.
and then it happens.
Hi, Hi. So when you are writing conversations for the bot, do you think about voice and like text message differently, or do you write in a way that it can be translated like equally across both?
So voice and text definitely have its language differences, how you use clauses, how you structure syntax. So I would say, in general, my principle is it should be accommodated into different medium. In voice, there's more conversational language. In text, there may be some texting text you need to translate it. In general, I try to use similar wordings and structure it differently. There are tasks like with time constraint, I use both and trying to see if both can work well into medium, it's great. So that's kind of like the baseline I have is like trying to do that. But ideally, my process is I do think you should respect the medium of text having its format and voice having its format. And if you have voice and text together, it should echo the same thing, but not the same, exact same, yeah.
Yeah, we actually, in our tool, allow you to actually do one for each. So you do Facebook Messenger conversation first, or you can do voice only. With Alexa or Google Assistant, you can do multimodal. What we have found talking to a lot of designers is that one conversation style does not fit all platforms. So how you're talking on voice with surfaces like Google Assistant is different, but if it's just voice experience, it's quite different in terms of how people communicate. Their attention span is different. Their ability to contain information in their head while they're having conversation is different. So you should really design separately for all of them.
Like a hawk, ginger hawk. Yeah, you guys try to stay up with coffee, which you might get in a second, but I try to do stuff like that. Here you go.
So quickly back on personality. So anything around like tuning the personality depending on kind of the sentiment of the interaction? So like someone's frustrated with an issue versus not?
Yeah. There's a lot of information that you can get as far as understanding if they're really upset. Them cursing is a pretty good sign that they're somewhat upset, so having some kind of flow off of that. But you'll start to unravel more and more different use cases. So it's impossible to say do it for everything, but there are certain contexts, like someone lost something, like a bag. That's a stressful situation, right? We don't like to be handled when we're in stress certain ways, right? We want to be assured that everything's going to be okay. And you want to put that into the thought process when you're designing. It's not going to be perfect in the beginning, but as people use it, you're going to get feedback, and you can slowly start tweaking and training it to be right, or at least show better numbers.
I think there's a lot of upfront qualitative kind of like process you can take in to just, let people play with it, like get the tone, set the feeling, and actually ask them the questions like, how do you feel like it? What is the tone? Specifically drill down into personality part. I think there are components of actually already release the bots. You can grab from feedbacks like people's, swearing, like, using, damn you, something, those kind of wordings. But I do think those elements is harder to separate out a little bit from actually, it may be just from the frustration of the interaction point. So I think those are good indicators, but doing some qualitative actually kind of information, getting some qualitative information here is actually, I think, fundamentally really important for you how to interpret those kind of data.
So earlier this year at Build Conference, Microsoft announced that they're going to have Alexa baked into along with Cortana. So I'm curious, do you see that as a trend where on the same operating system or on the same device there will be multiple agents or multiple personalities, and they can possibly talk to each other and hand off responsibilities based on who's the most competent one? Or are there design decisions, or are you thinking that might be something coming up in the future?
Yeah. Can you talk about future products or?
And please answer that in just one word if you could.
Yes. Maybe. Really hard to answer that because the desktop. desktop working? It's on. Okay. The personal desktop experience is very different than a business use case. I'll talk about in my talk. In business, definitely there is a clear projection where you don't want to deal with all these other systems, and there should be one kind of a thing that you talk to. Yeah, but with voice, I see value in different agents doing different things. So yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, so my personal point of view is when you think about real world is people talk to different people for their skill sets. So I think in a sense is really interesting model of like thinking about what is a real world analogy to this. And I think there is some interesting perspective, especially on design challenges, on how do you hand off, how do people build trust within all these kind of construct. So I think voice and chatbot is a brand new role. So I think definitely people are going there. Whether it will stick, I don't know, but it's an interesting model that people are experimenting on. Yeah.